There was once a heartbroken man who couldn't understand why he felt so lost. He was brave and strong, and on more than one occasion, despite all danger, he risked his life for the occupants of a house or building or any nature. He rescued cats. He worked to help people who got trapped in their cars. He was the first in a flood. In fact, he was the first to raise his hand to volunteer for any task, no matter what the risk. He was a fireman. And for too long, he felt a weariness of life that had taken his smile. He worked long hours and chose night shifts so as to be in the company of people less and less. He slept all day and worked all night. Now, as anyone will know, that humans need the daylight, and the fireman's boss knew this. He insisted that he take some time off work and try to find something to cheer him up. And so he did. He called up some of his old school friends and they went out for food and drinks. There was great merriment and laughter from all the boys as they joked with each other and played cards well into the night. As the night came to an end, our fireman's friend said, "Come and stay with me and my wife. We'll cheer you up in our little cottage by the sea. My children will play games with you and my wife makes the best fish pies." The fireman agreed, and the two went that night to stay in his house. The next morning, when his family awoke, they welcomed him, and his wife assured him that him being there would be a help to her husband, as he was a fisherman and needed extra hands to mend the nets. They had 6 children, and the house did indeed feel full of life and joy and lots of noise. The fireman felt a little better for a couple of days, but inevitably the old feeling of weariness crept into his bones, and he couldn't sleep. And so he took to wandering the old fishing village at night so as not to disturb the family. He climbed the old road that led to the harbour, and as he came over the crest of the hill, in front of him was the most beautiful full moon he had ever seen. Reflecting off the black ripples of the water's surface, it looked like a magical place. He thought for a moment he could hear singing, and he quickened his pace. But instead of going straight onto the pier, he turned left following the voice and curved back upon himself to the slipway. He knew there was a quiet place there, as he'd seen swimmers taking a dip only that afternoon. But who could be singing at this time of night? He got to the water's edge and there was no one to be seen. All at once he was disappointed and relieved. Such was the beauty of the scenery, with the mountains as a backdrop, the clinking of small razor-clam boats as they tipped each other in the gentle swell tethered safely to the pier beyond, and stars as clear and abundant as grains of sand on the strand. He was overcome with the beauty of it all and started to weep. He sat down on what looked like an old leather bag and finally cried his heart out. Unafraid that anyone would hear him, he sobbed unreservedly till tears ran down his cheeks and dropped to the water that lapped at his feet. When he was finished, he heard a voice in the darkness say, "Salt water is the cure for everything." He jumped up, clutching the bag in his hand, for fear had taken over him. "Who's there? Are you in the water? I can't see your face, the moon is behind you." The most beautiful woman he'd ever seen emerged from the rocks just to his right. Salt water. It's either sweat, tears, or the sea. Why are you so sad? The fireman couldn't remember why, for all at once he felt nothing but love for her and tried to make out her frame and features. It was only then that he noticed she wasn't wearing any clothes. At once he offered her his coat, for he was already completely enchanted by her. She smiled and stepped out into the light. She was round and her eyes dark like the water beneath them, and her hair was so long as to almost wrap around her body. "Where have you come from? Who are you and why are you here?" he said. "My name is Siobhan, and I'm a Selkie. It's midsummer's night, and this is where we come to dance on the strand for a while, just like humans." "But you're a mythical creature. I don't believe in magic or fairy stories." "Ah, well then that's why you're so sad. Thank you for your coat, but you see, you've been sitting on mine." "This old thing," he said, holding out the rubbery clump on which he sat. "Well, yes, she replied. Please take mine, it's warm and I insist. She took the coat from his outstretched arm and wrapped it hesitantly around her. Come to the house with me, we've coffee there and warm scones from the oven and... He would have said anything to keep her there a moment longer. Siobhan looked into his eyes and then back at the sea. Perhaps for a little while then. As they walked, they talked. He found for the first time in a very long time he could let his sadness and weariness leave him. And all that was left was a warm love he felt for this beautiful woman who came from the sea. It was as if he was under a spell, and it was love at first sight. She talked about the sea and all the beauty it held, from the ice-blue palaces of the Arctic, the fjords of Finland, to the craggy coastline of Scotland, where lonesome fishermen looked to the sea for their wives. For it held true that if a human kept the coat of a Selkie, they could marry them and keep them on dry land. But if they were to discover their coat at any time, they would immediately return to the sea. The morning was upon them in no time at all, and the inhabitants of the house were starting to awaken. She took off his coat in order to return it to him, but the fireman was confused and didn't want her to leave. Please, stay with me. I cannot let you go. But I am a Selkie, she said. The sea will always call me back, and I must go and be with my people. I need my coat, otherwise I'm trapped in this human form and cannot swim. Then I shall hide it somewhere, and you can never find it, for you have brought me great joy, and I cannot let you go. Please, marry me. I will love you and look after you forever, I promise. She smiled gently. You cannot keep someone that is wild. You must let them choose, or they're never yours for any time at all. All we really have is right now. He knelt down on one knee and held out his hand in offer of marriage. Please marry me. For as long as you choose, then. That's enough for me. She looked to the sea, her eyes like dark pools full of wonder and curiosity. For the Selkies loved the humans too. Okay. But we must live here, so every day I can feel close to home. Yes, yes, he exclaimed, and took her in his arms in an embrace, for he knew he should never be lost again. They were married later that week, and he moved house as soon as he could. They were indeed very happy. Their love for each other was full of warmth and joy, and soon they were parents to two beautiful boys with dark curly hair and eyes the colour of rock pools. The fireman and the Selkie were the perfect balance of fire and water, and their two boys were a breath of fresh air. They grew up on the harbour's edge, a house on the hill overlooking the port with the mountains on one side and the great stretch of coast to the south as far as the city of Dublin. It's a place on the border between magic and reality. Their mother made sure they swam every day, and at night she sat on the stairs outside both their rooms and told them stories to fall asleep to. The eldest boy was gifted with his hands and could carve the most beautiful sculptures from driftwood in which he engraved the magic of the stories of the sea. The youngest boy had webbed toes and swam like his mother. He was the best fisherman in the village. He was more often at sea than on land, and sang with a voice that seeped into the body like the thrill of cold water awakening your bones. One day, many years later, when the youngest lad was in the attic with his mother looking for something to pack for school, he came across an old suitcase. He clicked the lock and took out an old leathery coat. At once, his mother's eyes glistened with tears. I have loved you all as long as I could, but now I must go back to the sea. I can hear it calling me. Her young son did not understand. But I thought you loved us. I do love you. And that is what I have taught you. We are separated only by form. We share the same connection to each other as fish do to water, birds to the air, and trees to the earth. I must go. I love you now, I always have, and I always will. She kissed him on the forehead and left. The son ran down to the front door, but she was nowhere to be seen. He told his father. His father held him and said, "It's time, McCree. Now we must hold on to each other and know that we've had all the love of several lifetimes in just a few short years." I promised to let her go, and so I must keep that promise. They both cried and held each other, gathering the older son too, for their heartache seemed too much to bear alone. That night they went to the shore, and the father told them the story of how they met, and they felt comforted there. He remembered that first night when she'd said to him, "You know the cure for everything is salt water. It's either sweat, tears, or the sea." In the darkness, a faint song whispered out over the waves. They felt its warmth and knew she had returned home. A sea maid sings on yonder reef, the spellbound seals draw near. A lilt that lures beyond belief, mortals enchanted here. Coiran, iron, hero. Coiran, iron, hero. Coiran, iron, hero. Coiran, iron, hero. The wandering ploughman halts his plough. The maid her milking stays, and sheep on hillside, bird on boughs, pause and listen in amaze. Coiran, iron, hero. Coiran, iron, hero. Coiran, iron, hero. Coiran, iron, hero. Was it a dream? We're all asleep. Or did she cease her strain? All the seals with a splash dive into the deep, and the world goes on again.